Blockchance Online Live is an online live-streamed broadcast talk show about blockchain, AI, and green technology. We bring inspiring speakers and innovative thought leaders together to talk about current and future developments within these exciting new fields. Join us to learn how we can use these disruptive technologies to better aid humanity and strive for a fair, secure, humane, and positive future. Get involved in our community and share your opinions and ideas. Together, we can make a difference.
Hello and welcome to Blockchains Online Live. My name is Peci and today we will discuss the energy consumption of Bitcoin. We will discuss why Bitcoin wastes so much energy, how we could change this, and why companies like, for example, Tesla, who believe in the value of Bitcoin, actually are afraid of what we could call the dirty Bitcoin narrative. But how dirty is Bitcoin actually? So the electricity consumption has always been a critical topic in the blockchain community. Miners that use proof of work will always try to reduce their energy consumption. And they have actually an economic incentive to do so. And if we look at the current development of renewable energy, it's the first time since 2020 during the IAA, it was announced that it's cheaper to build solar plants than fuel plants. So in the long run, we could argue that something like Bitcoin will use renewable energy just because it's cheaper, not because they want to or believe in a sustainable world, but simply because it's cheaper. And this is always how the Bitcoin miners have functioned. They will follow incentives that are economical. Today's guest was Marc Bevand. He could not join, unfortunately, but we got another great guest. It's Konrad. He is the COO at Blockchains, and he will join me to discuss and elaborate why Bitcoin uses so much energy and what we can change about this and when this will actually change. So please say hello to the audience, Konrad.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be here.
Fantastic. So to get us started, maybe let's try to understand why Bitcoin wastes energy. The energy consumption of Bitcoin has something to do with the way how blocks are what we call mined. Mining a block means that you basically create a block that can't be changed anymore, and this new mined block is added to a previous block, and therefore we call it a blockchain. And mining a block, what does this mean actually is, in the end, you're just looking for a random number. It's nothing else. And this random number is truly random. You can't pre-calculate it. There is no shortcut. There is no algorithm that makes it faster to calculate this number. You can simply try different numbers, and then a specific formula will produce the result that the Bitcoin network asks you for. So this means that this is purely trying out. And purely trying out means that the faster you are, the better your chances are to find or to mine a block. So what miners actually do is they try to accumulate as much mining power as possible so that they are as quick as possible to be the first ones to actually mine a block. Because what happens in the Bitcoin network is that several miners, or all miners actually, try to mine a block at the same time. And whoever is the first will actually say, hey, I found the number, here it is, and sends it to all the others. They validate this. And if they agree, then they start to mine a new block. And why should the miner do this? They do this because if they are the first one to mine a block, they actually get a reward. And this is Bitcoin. This is actually also how Bitcoins are issued. So this means there is no easier or more effective, or let's put it this way, more efficient way to mine Bitcoin than just trying out. Therefore, what happened throughout the years, in the beginning, people started to mine with their normal notebook and computer because there were not so many others mining at the same time. So there's actually something that is called the difficulty that adjusts to the overall mining power of the network. This was pretty low in the beginning, so you could use your personal computer. At a later stage, people like Marc Bevand, they developed clients that allowed you to use, for example, your GPU to mine Bitcoins. And this was much quicker. So they had an advantage. He was actually one of, or maybe even the fastest miner in the world for a short period of time, while because he was the first one to use GPUs. Then people came to the conclusion, well, it's a specific calculation that you do. And this specific calculation could be done on a specific hardware. And these are called ASICs. So these are specialized chips that we use to actually mine Bitcoins. And they can only do one thing. They can do this calculation that is important for Bitcoin, which is basically, and don't worry if you don't understand this, but for the people who do, for the computer scientists here, they hash the content of the block. There's nothing else, and compare it to another number. And if they meet a certain threshold, then they fulfill the requirement. So these ASICs, these specialized CPUs or specialized chips, are now used everywhere in Bitcoin. You actually don't really have a chance with your personal computer nowadays. So you buy these specialized chips, and then you have something, if you go for it in a big style, like a mining farm, as we called it. And these mining farms, they actually operate by simple economic rules. Okay, how much do I get if I find Bitcoin? What's the market value? And how much do I invest to actually get a Bitcoin? And this is how they will always, and also how they always did, operate. And this means as soon as they find a way to reduce their electricity costs, they will do this. And this is now where we can see that if we manage, and this is actually happening, to build renewable energies or plants for renewable energies cheaper than, for example, fuel plants, then they will use these renewable energies. So eventually, Bitcoin will become green because there is an incentive to do so. And this is the overall, the picture why I think Bitcoin will become green, and also why Bitcoin is using so much energy nowadays.
And that's quite interesting. Just have like one question for you as well, because we will see an increasing amount of energy that needs to be produced in the world to, for example, fuel our cars, like e-cars and stuff like that. And so do you think it's worth to actually use like a big amount of this energy to run the Bitcoin network, or do you think it's better to use this energy, for example, to have more e-cars or anything else?
Excellent question. And this is actually where we get into a philosophical debate, let's say, because the question that we are asking here, what value do we put into something and what do we get out of it? And this value in this case is, of course, energy. And then we need to decide, in the best case, as a society, what is valuable to us. We could ask the same question, and people did actually in the back, like just maybe 5 or 10 years ago. Why do we have so many cats in the internet? Why do we have so many dogs and memes in the internet? Is this valuable? And it seems like that at least part of the society decided, yes, it's valuable enough that we want to invest this energy to actually allow this kind of communication. And the same applies to the Bitcoin network. If people believe that it's not worth it, they will actually stop investing in it and buying it. And what is happening right now, they found like one argument against Bitcoin, and this is completely valid. I mean, nobody really declines this, that it's super wasteful. Wasteful in that sense that there could be better ways to actually mine these Bitcoins. But these better ways could be one that I just named in the beginning, renewable energies. And second, maybe there is some way like proof of stake where we could reduce this energy cost. But we don't have any experiences yet. So in the end, I can't really decide if it's valuable to do this with Bitcoin. But it seems like the society feels the Bitcoin networks gives them something that they need, and this is quite an individual answer to everyone, I guess.
Yeah, I guess that's true. I mean, there are people around the world who would definitely argue that a free money like the Bitcoin is definitely worth spending the energy, for example, against inflation in Venezuela, or like as a money dissidents could use to actually be free from the system in China or countries with like less rights than we have here. But you just mentioned the proof of stake mechanism or consensus mechanism. I mean, we will see it on Ethereum, like it's going to be implemented soon. But how do you expect it to work? Like, do you think it's actually that proof of stake will be in the consensus mechanism we will use in the future, like in the next 10 years? Because I mean, we've never experienced it in a large scale like that, right?
Yeah, that's correct. Maybe just to be very precise, a proof of stake is not a consensus algorithm. Many people do this mistake, but actually just a mechanism to reach consensus. And what we have in Bitcoin and also Ethereum is using it, it's called Nakamoto consensus. So what it basically means is the longest chain is the correct one. And producing the longest chain is happening right now with proof of work. This is working since almost 11 years now. And with the proof of stake, we have the problem that, as you just mentioned, we don't have any experiences. We don't know if this will work in the real world with a big network like Bitcoin or Ethereum. I mean, Ethereum 2 has already implemented proof of stake, but there is nothing happening there. So there is basically no value there. And what the Bitcoin community will do is, because they are quite conservative compared to Ethereum or other blockchains, they will closely watch the Ethereum community and see if this academic approach of proof of stake will actually work in the real world. If yes, then I believe that there is, again, no reason why Bitcoin should not switch. I mean, there could be other political reasons that might occur in the future, but just from a technical standpoint, there is actually no reason why Bitcoin could not upgrade. This is one of the beauty of blockchain, actually. It's programmable money, and this also means that you can improve the system itself. You can update it, and this means that we can adjust to new requirements in the future.
Yeah, quite interesting. And you just mentioned like the developers of Bitcoin that are a little bit more on the back compared to Ethereum. But who are those people? Like, who's actually participating in the Bitcoin network? Like, who are the miners? Who are those who are developing it further? Like, who's deciding what's happening? Can you elaborate a little bit on that more?
Yes, definitely. Like, the Bitcoin community is a little more not closed. They are quite open. I mean, you can just go to GitHub and then check the Bitcoin C implementation and open an issue, open a pull request, and interact with the people there. So it's not like they're doing something in the background. But it's not like in Ethereum where you have a foundation and you have different companies that are actively involved in it, and they are much more present in the media. The Bitcoin core developers, they are mainly in mailing lists and in the internet, let's say, and they are all quite well known. So there is no super secret about them, like, for example, around Nakamoto, the original creator of Bitcoin. But still, it's what they are mainly concerned about is the security of the network, because this network is already securing a lot of money, or let's put it this way, a lot of value. And they are not as innovative as the Ethereum network. Everything that is happening in terms of innovation is proposed as Bitcoin improvement proposals, so the BIPs. And this community is as well quite active, but they won't try crazy stuff. And this is actually good, because the robustness of the Bitcoin network is what gives it value. It's the most simple blockchain that we can imagine that works. And therefore, people who are really interested in rather storing value than trying new kind of applications, they will go to Bitcoin. And this also means that if we want any kind of change in the Bitcoin network, we always have to consider this sphere or this layer of security. Why don't we switch to proof of stake? Because, yeah, it's quite dangerous right now. So even if we have this argument of energy waste, and this is actually not quite true, we can talk about this in a minute, and that it wastes energy. But it's not enough to actually force a change. And this is, I guess, the attitude that is prominent in the Bitcoin community.
Yeah, true. And I mean, you just mentioned the energy consumption. I mean, this is actually, I think, the point why the viewers are here, why we are here, and why Marc, our guest, was supposed to be here. But let's talk about the energy consumption of Bitcoin. I mean, it's compared often to, I heard, Netherlands, Denmark, Venezuela as well. So there's a huge amount of countries you can compare the energy consumption of the Bitcoin network to. It's often referred to the Bitcoin Energy Consumption Index by the University of Cambridge, which is basically quite interesting for me to see, because it's an approach of like a really renowned university on a statistically correct approach on the measurement of the Bitcoin energy consumption. And like, what do you think about comparing it to countries? I mean, no one is comparing the euro to a country. So what's your thought on that?
Yeah, it's actually an interesting comparison that you do, because if you compare it to a country, then you assume that Bitcoin has similar functions as a country, but it actually does not have. I mean, you could use Bitcoin, or especially Ethereum, for example, for decentralized identities. You could use it to actually pay taxes or in general money and so on. So there might be like country-like properties that you could attach to at least Ethereum. I don't think this applies to Bitcoin. But why are people comparing it to countries? I guess there are many reasons to this. And one reason that we should not underestimate is that it's rather simple to imagine that energy consumption of a country and compare it to Bitcoin. So it's more tangible if we do it this way. But if we look at the graphs, for example, the energy consumption of Bitcoin, yes, it's high. But it's right now, it's the same as in the mid of 2018. So this is nothing that is completely new. Then we have like towards the end of 2019, a similar energy consumption like right now. But why was it so in the mainstream media was mainly because like a few months ago, it reached a new all-time high. And every time something reaches a new all-time high in the Bitcoin network, or also Ethereum, and sometimes also other networks, it gets the attention of the mainstream media. Then people have something to report about, and then the first thing that you will look at is, okay, this is a lot of energy that you waste, and what kind of comparison do you have? And countries, they are more transparent than, for example, certain companies. So it's easier also because of that to compare it to these countries. And I guess these are one of the few reasons why Bitcoin is compared to countries. But is it a fair comparison? Maybe, depends on the debate. But is it a reasonable comparison? That's, I guess, the important question. And I feel like it's not reasonable because it's not helpful. What do you tell by saying, okay, it's right now, for example, it's wasting using as much energy as Venezuela? But we could argue, okay, is Bitcoin bringing more value to the world than Venezuela? So that's an open question. I don't know about this, but it's not really helpful for any kind of debate. If you want to argue, okay, Bitcoin wastes too much energy, we should reduce this. Yes, no doubt about this. But as I explained in the beginning, we need to assure that the security is quite high, so that the other properties of Bitcoin are still valid. And this is, for example, the openness and censorship resistance that Bitcoin as a payment opportunity provides to us.
Interesting that you just mentioned it, because looking at payment solutions, I always say it's nearly impossible that the current state of the Bitcoin network will ever handle the real payment world. For example, just Visa is like having billions of of payments or transactions like every year, and Bitcoin is not even able to handle that. So, are there any solutions that Bitcoin can ever be a payment solution instead of like what's called now like the digital gold? So what do you think of that?
Yeah, very good that you're raising this point, because, okay, is Bitcoin a payment solution? Right now, I completely agree. Like how it is right now, it's much too expensive and too slow to actually be a payment solution that could handle the whole world. But there are already some developments, like the Lightning Network, a layer 2 solution that might eventually allow you to pay for your coffee or even something that is cheaper than that. Even without paying any fees or very low fees. So this is one thing that hopefully will happen in the future. And if it does not happen, for example, if the society decides that Bitcoin is more like a digital gold equivalent, then we should compare the energy consumption of Bitcoin to the energy consumption of producing and managing and storing gold. And then I'm quite sure that Bitcoin will be much better than that.
Yeah, definitely. I'm showing that as well. But you just mentioned the second layer, Lightning Network. Can you explain it a bit for those who are not familiar with that?
Yes, definitely. So let's make this rather simple because it's not so easy to actually understand it in depth. But the main idea is that you open something that's called a channel on the main network, so on Bitcoin. And then you pay, let's say, a Bitcoin or so in there. And then you can use this Bitcoin on another network. So what you do is, for example, Konrad, I want to send you half a Bitcoin. Then you use this half a Bitcoin and send 0.1 Bitcoin to someone else. And then I send from my half Bitcoin that I have left another 0.1 to my friend. And then in the end, all I do if I want to exit, what we call it, into the mainnet again, we just write the final answer. So what's important is that I have 0.4 Bitcoin left and you have 0.4 Bitcoin left. And we only do one transaction with this final amount. And therefore, we reduce the number of transactions that we need to do on the main layer and put everything else on the second layer. And this allows us, through other techniques as well, to do much cheaper transactions with the security of the mainnet network as soon as we need it, because we don't need it all the time. The decentralization aspect is important, but we don't need it all the time, and especially not for certain sums. So I'm fine if I have my daily business done on a less secure layer, but for example, my savings, I would like to have them as safe as possible. And that's the main idea of the Lightning Network. And maybe to be more on point with our topic today, how will this affect the energy consumption of Bitcoin? I believe that it will make sure that the Bitcoin network stays relevant, also in other aspects. So I don't really believe that the Lightning Network will reduce the energy consumption of the Bitcoin network. It will rather it will probably have no real effect on this, except that it will increase the value, hopefully, of Bitcoin, and therefore it will be more, let's say, profitable for miners to actually do this. And we will do a short break, and then we will come back in a minute.
Blockchance Online Live is an Where are we heading? Who owns your data? Who owns your money? Your future. We are approaching a new dawn. blockchain technology. Artificial intelligence. Sustainability. Be a part of the evolution. Hamburg, Germany, 2021. Blockchains, 2021.
All right, welcome back. And I'm very happy to announce that Marc has joined us now, so we can have a discussion with him. Hey, Marc, nice to see you. Please say hello to the audience.
Hello, Albert. Hello to everyone who is watching.
Great. Okay, so we were just talking about the different properties of Bitcoin and the energy consumption. And one question, if we look at, for example, at Antonopoulos, he describes the 5 pillars of Bitcoin, which is it's open, public, borderless, censorship resistant, and neutral. And these properties of Bitcoin heavily also depend on where these miners are located. For example, let's assume that every miner would be in Germany. Then these properties would actually difficult or almost impossible to be reached. So what I would like to understand a little bit better, how can we ensure that these Bitcoin miners are distributed enough that we don't affect these properties?
It's very simple. Very much. It's very much a situation where miners are competing with each other. So natural economic forces are pushing miners to optimize the cost of their operations in whatever geographical area they are located. And sometimes we do see miners who make decisions to move their equipment, their mining farms from one city to another, from one country to another, depending on electricity prices, on access to mining hardware, on access to labor to maintain their mining farms. So that's in my opinion, market forces are always going to push different countries, different areas to compete with each other. They are moving, improving their operations, reducing their costs over time. I think it's very unlikely that we will see a large number of miners concentrated in one particular area to a very high degree. If that was the case, this area would also have other advantages. These advantages would translate to other industries that depend on getting access to, for example, cheap electricity. But what we see in general in a technological world, if a new technology of power plants allow someone to create energy at a cheaper price, there is always a technological transfer that happens to other plants, other countries. So overall, we are all benefiting from advancements in electricity production. So that's my answer. I think that we are going to always see miners healthy, distributed healthily around the world.
It's always fascinating if you think about different aspects of Bitcoin, how well thought the system is, so how well planned, or at least the game theoretical entities, how well they are incentivized to behave in a certain way to ensure the health of the network. And we talked already before you reached us about the energy consumption that the miners cause, so that they need to actually mine these blocks. What we would also like to better understand, who are these miners nowadays? So are they mainly companies? Are they still more mainly pools? Or how are they actually organized nowadays? And also, do you see any change, especially compared to the very beginning of Bitcoin?
Oh, certainly. 10 years ago, you had mostly small miners, but since then, the industry has matured. Players have seen that mining is here to stay. So this has allowed investors to trust the ecosystem and have some sort of belief that Bitcoin mining is here to stay. So this has brought more capital. So over time, now we see bigger players. We see very large companies, like billion-dollar plus companies doing mining. So nowadays, if you look at the distribution of hash rate, a big chunk will be coming from large players, but then you also have a big number of medium and smaller players who are going to account for a smaller fraction of the hash rate. But overall, we see yeah, pretty good distribution of different size of miners. We like so some of them are going to be smart individual miners with just one person with one machine in their basement, and at the other hand of the scale, it's a big company doing some mining. It would be more ideal, of course, if you had if small miners represented a bigger share of the global hash rate. But I guess it's a how can I say this? It due to inherently big miners are going to represent a big portion of the hash rate. On the plus side, big miners tend to be motivated by just being profitable, making money. They only care about making sure their hardware is up and running, reaping the Bitcoin rewards, and in a sense that's the most neutral you can be toward Bitcoin. You want to provide this mining hash rate and reap the reward, and you don't really care about the politics or anything behind Bitcoin, as long as this hash rate is securing the network. In the end, that's really all that matters for Bitcoin.
And do you see any risks or challenges, especially for the miners in the future? So is there any risk that there will be a kind of centralization of miners or a handful of big miners, and that it's not profitable for, let's say, small miners to contribute at all? Or is the network designed in a way that it will always be profitable and reasonable also for small miners to participate in some way?
Oh, there are always some risks, but they are maybe not the risks you expect to be. For example, a single miner that controls a very large portion of the hash rate is dangerous. You don't want a single company to be controlling a large fraction of the hash rate. It gives them some sort of some type of power. But is it making small miners not profitable? I don't believe so. For one, small miners are going to not have to care about certain costs. For example, if a single individual who has a miner in his basement doesn't really have to care about deploying a bunch of expensive infrastructure for cooling, because a single miner, you have the heat that can dissipate by itself in the basement. A single miner doesn't have to hire labor to maintain his machine. He's going to do the maintenance himself, and so on. So in a sense, small miners have some benefit from some positive points of their small scale infrastructure that large miners cannot escape. So that's healthy. That's one of the reasons why you still have some small miners on the network, because they can still compete, assuming they have access to cheap electricity with big miners. And that's going to be the main differentiator, how much your electricity costs.
And we talked also about like how the miners in the future might use renewable energy, just for the simple fact that it's actually cheaper for them. They will always strive to optimize their profit. If we look, for example, at networks like Ethereum, we have mainly an off-chain governance. And so there are many different institutions and entities that do these kind of upgrades and agree upon. On newer blockchains, like, for example, Polkadot, we have an on-chain governance where people can actually vote on-chain to drive an update or upgrade. And I'm wondering, how would you describe the politics or the update culture in Bitcoin? So let's assume that we want to enforce something, some new algorithm that is more energy efficient, just as a random example. Who would you actually talk to, and how would you actually propose something like this?
Bitcoin is very conservative and moves very slowly, which is good and bad. Good because the community agrees to what Bitcoin should be. Generally speaking, there are always debates and arguments, and it moves slowly because it's they want the system to be robust and solid, not making changes haphazardly. So very much changes that had happened in the past have been built on based on consensus effort, both political and technological effort to prove that the changes that are being made are worthwhile. And the fact that the Bitcoin community seeks to have consensus agreement among most of the users, miners, just mere users, and so on, is this is why it's been moving pretty slowly. And that's when you see forks that happen. For example, Bitcoin Cash a few years ago that forked from Bitcoin is because some users did not agree with the direction, specifically the size of blocks, and they made their own forks. And that's how I think things should happen in a blockchain-based cryptocurrencies. If there is a disagreement, a group is free to split up the main chain and run their own cryptocurrency on their side and attract whatever users they can manage to convince to join them, and those who agree with these new decisions.
We had this crazy bull run during this year, and many people who were not involved with the blockchain at all, they at least know what they heard of Bitcoin, and then at a later point in time they heard also of this energy waste or consumption of Bitcoin. And so I get many questions from people who are not in the scene. Hey, what's actually the solution there? Are they aware? And I'm asking you because you have these deep insights. The community always cared for energy consumption because of the simple fact that they want to optimize their profit. But has the debate changed anyhow, that they also think now, okay, it's not just the energy consumption because of profit, but actually also the sustainability that we want to support as the Bitcoin network? And this is the first question, and also an indirect question that belongs to this is, are there any Bitcoin improvement proposals that actually focus on reducing energy consumption, or does the community not really care about this?
Okay. To answer the second question first, I'm not aware specifically of a BIP who focuses on improving energy consumption. But one thing I can say is that because of technological progress, renewables have recently become the cheapest electricity in history. For example, one of the reports from the International Energy Agency, the IEA, last year announced that this is the case for solar power, at least. So this is important for miners because they look for the cheapest electricity possible. So naturally, this over time is going to, this is pushing miners as we speak to use renewable energy more and more often. That's great news. Now, the other thing is to keep in mind is the global energy consumption of miners roughly follows the Bitcoin price. I make a lot of simplifications and assumptions because the higher Bitcoin is, the more profits miners reap. Over the last 10 years, of course, the price of Bitcoin has soared up incredibly, going from a fraction of a cent to roughly $30,000 today. So energy consumption has increased similarly. Now, are we, some Bitcoin proponents say Bitcoin will reach $1 million in soon. Is it going to happen? I don't know. What I know is that exponential increases in price cannot last forever. At some point, Bitcoin will. It's already starting to slow down. If you look at the big chart of the price of Bitcoin on a log chart. So what this means is energy consumption is not going to go up another. If we went up by a factor of 100-fold over the last few years. It's not going to go up by another 100-fold over the next few years. It's going to slowly plateau, or who knows? Anything is possible. Bitcoin could crash and be really affected in some way in the near future. No one can really predict the future, but what I can say is not only miners are moving more and more to renewables, and the rate of increase of energy consumption is not going to be as high as it was in the last few years, for sure.
One important thing to actually measure all these changes is how do we observe this energy consumption. There is the Cambridge Bitcoin Electricity Consumption Index, and you, for example, 2017 already developed a techno-economic model that they're using or that they use as their base model to actually develop this index. And could you maybe quickly or as a high-level overview explain us how we even know how much these miners are wasting or consuming? So what's the approach to actually measure something like this in a world where these miners, they could be everywhere, right, and use any kind of hardware? So how do you measure something like this?
Well, it's based on you really need two data points to measure this. You need three. You need to look at the hash rates, global hash rate. You need to make an estimate of how much miners are paying for their electricity. And then the third point is you need to look at what type of hardware exists out there to mine Bitcoin. So the last 2 points, knowing how much miners pay for electricity and what type of hardware they use to mine, is very much, it's just plain old market research. You have people have tried to reach out to miners and ask them questions, poll them, try to get an estimate of a subset of miners that represents global miners, and from that they extrapolate numbers and the global electricity consumptions. So because this is based on market research that only as accurate as your input can be, it's just an estimate. There is a wide range of possible numbers that you can come out with, but very roughly, yeah, you're talking about the Cambridge Bitcoin energy consumption index, and they estimate roughly 100 terawatt-hour per year. So that's a number that doesn't speak very much to a lot of people, but some compare this to the energy consumed by an entire country. You can also make the comparison to, for example, the three gorgeous hydroelectric dam in the world that also generates about 100 terawatt-hour per year. So I think it's a cool thing to compare it to that, because you can visualize what a dam is. You can take a picture from it from an airplane, and you can see, okay, this is how much power miners are using. That gives you a very concrete image of what this represents.
Thank you very much. We are reaching the end of our show, and I want to quickly summarize what we discussed today. So we learned why the Bitcoin network needs this kind of energy at all to mine these blocks. We also learned that the dirty Bitcoin narrative that is driven right now might not be so true, at least not in the near future, because Bitcoin miners will always drive for optimizing their profit. And we learned that there are renewable energies that are actually cheaper than, for example, fuel plants that you can use to power your miners. And also there are many different mechanisms in the Bitcoin network that hopefully will make sure that the Bitcoin miners stay distributed enough or travel around enough, that the properties of the Bitcoin network, especially the security, is not damaged. We also discussed in the beginning why we should or will Bitcoin ever switch to something like proof of stake, and said that yes, if there is some experience in big scale, like for example with Ethereum, then Bitcoin will also look into this and maybe adopt it if it's useful. And also, and this is something where we should also spend some time in the future, what is actually the value that Bitcoin brings to the community or the society. And it seems like the society has decided that it's valuable enough to spend this kind of energy on this. And this is roughly what we discussed today, and unfortunately we have to stop here. But if you have any questions or any remarks, please reach out to Marc on Twitter. I guess it's the easiest way. And also please provide any questions in our chat, and we will make sure to forward them and try to answer all of it. I thank you very much, Marc, that you joined us here. And
thank you. Thank you for you and hosting me. Thank you.
Yeah, and also thank you very much to the community. It was a pleasure to have this discussion, and see you all very soon, and have a great day and evening. Bye, everyone.
Bye.